So with me today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Peter J. Lee, who is a PhD associate professor at the University of Houston in Texas and a China policy specialist for the Humane Society International. Dr. Lee specializes in East Asian politics with an emphasis in the domestic politics, foreign policy, and environmental governance of the People's Republic of China. His research covers elite politics of China, Northeast Asian security, U.S. China relations, and China's environmental and animal welfare politics. So in short, we have quite the scholar on the show today. And so welcome to the show, Dr. Lee.
Thank you.
We're all very excited to learn from your expertise on the subject matter, especially the socio-political climate in China as it relates to animal rights. But before we delve into those details of your work and your research and your knowledge, I always like to have a little bit of background history on our guests. So would you mind telling us a little bit, where were you born and raised, and what was it like growing up? Did you have family pets, for example?
That's a great question. I was born in China and raised up in China. I went to elementary school, middle school, and university in China.
In what part of China?
I grew up in southeast part of China, and I went to school in the provincial capital and in Beijing. I studied English, that's my undergraduate major, and I went on to graduate study in foreign service. I came to the United States in 1987 as a graduate student, studying international politics. Now, my childhood was during the time when Mao Zedong was still the great leader. So, Mao Zedong died in 1976.
Okay.
And yes.
I'm not as familiar with those
the Chinese politics.
Yes, but
okay.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit briefly about that time.
Yeah, just very briefly. So I lived through the most difficult time of China when food was rationed. There was a lot of poverty. And China, even though a huge country at that time, was one of the poorest countries in the world. Wow. When I was a kid, we did not have pets because, pets were not allowed by the government, especially when we live in urban area. So urbanites were not allowed to have dogs. Okay. So I did not, have the, experience, having a pet. But I did love, dogs, and I saw puppies when I was little. I think around 8 or 10 years. When I saw the puppies, I just couldn't leave. As one of them. But my mother.
How did you see those puppies?
I went to, we went to visit a relative's house, and they happened to have a dog because they have this relative was one of the more privileged, people in the country.
Wealthy.
So. Not necessarily wealthy, it's just they were, part of the communist elites. Okay. So they had a big compound, right? So the very big house, very big, fenced yard, a big compound. So they had 2 dogs, and one of the dogs had puppies. So we went there. And then when I saw the puppy, I just couldn't, believe how much
they were
instantly. Yeah, they were amazing. So I want to have one, but my mother said no. And I asked my mother, but this is what she said. My mother, before I was born, they used to have a dog, and that was in the early 1960s. So China had a great famine between 1959 to 1962, and my family had a dog. At that time, they lived in the rural area, in the countryside. Okay. So they had a dog for about 8 years. So the dog was a part of the family. But one day, they came home. My sister came home. My mother came home, and they couldn't find the dog. So at that time, a lot of dogs were killed by other people because there was a starvation in the country. Right. So my mother told me we could never. And she said, "I will never have a dog." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because we were heartbroken when our family dog was stolen and killed. So we didn't want to go through another disaster like that.
Yeah.
So I did not have, dog when I was a kid.
That's a very heart-wrenching story, and
Yes.
it's
Yes.
actually echoed by another guest on my show, Suki Su, who's a director of the Animal Hope and Wellness China shelter. She had her dog poisoned in front of her own eyes. And I guess, especially during that time, there was a famine, as you said. And so, of course, people were scrambling for food sources.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that's your background on...
that was my background.
But you still had that love, and apparently your family had a love for animals. So that was something that you grew up with, that idea that animals are there to be our friends and companions? Would you say that's a fair...
I would say this because we did not have enough contact with companion animals when I was little. But I was very much influenced by my mother, who was a very compassionate woman. And during that time, when China was very poor, there were a lot of people begging on the streets from rural areas. So we live in the urban center. So we saw a lot of rural people begging. So this is how my mother dealt with the situation. Very often we had beggars knocking on the door, asking for food. Never once did I see my mother say no to these people.
Wow.
She would always give a few something, yes, some money, and oftentimes she would ask me to give a bowl of rice, to the people. So that was something that, I think, passed on from my mother to me.
Absolutely, that love and compassion for beings, whether it's an animal or human. So
yes.
That's beautiful. And so you said that you arrived in this United States to study as your undergraduate degree. At what university?
Actually, I came in 1987 as a graduate student.
Oh, okay.
So I did my undergraduate in China with a bachelor, and I went to Syracuse University to study international politics.
Where you teach today?
No, I'm teaching at University of Houston downtown, but I went to Syracuse in New York.
Ah, okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And so how long did you study at the Syracuse University in New York?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I was there for 1 year and got my master in international relations.
Oh, okay.
So I went back to China for a couple of years, and then I came back to the United States again and did my PhD at Northern Arizona University, and I also studied international politics.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you are an expert on China politics and not just China, I guess, international politics and relations. So you're a perfect guest for us today because the podcast, really, the goal of the podcast is to educate because a lot of people have misconceptions, especially here in the West, and we don't truly understand the nature of the problem and how to best go about resolving it or finding some kind of resolution that would satisfy both continents, if you will, because for us, and I grew up in Canada, I've never had such a rich cultural upbringing as you, but we grew up in Canada, and like the United States, dogs and cats are companions, and their dog is seen as man's best friend. And so often for us, it's very difficult to see images of dogs being abused and slaughtered for food. So it's the idea of the podcast is to try to enlighten us on what is actually happening, where does it come from. So we'll go through all those questions today.
Okay.
But one of my first questions for guests is always, because I discovered the dog-cat meat trade issue only 2 years ago, so very recently. And I discovered it through the Yulin Dog Meat Festival. Because I saw some posts on the internet and I researched and I discovered there was a festival that lasts 10 days. It happens in Yulin, which is in the Guangxi province of China, every summer solstice. Obviously, that festival has dwindled down quite a bit, I think, since it it
Yeah.
inaugurated in 2009. And
Yeah.
the festival really it was a commercial, it's done to boost dog meat sales.
Yes,
That were
exactly.
waning at the time, and it did
Yeah.
probably attract tourists, and it probably boosted the economy of that region a little bit.
Yeah.
But then, of course, it also elicited a lot of protests from international communities.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how long have you known about this festival and the dog cat meat trade in China? Even though you're from China, a lot of people
Yeah.
are not aware of it. So.
Yeah, I have to say that the majority of the Chinese people do not eat dog meat and have not eaten dog meat. That's one thing. When I grew up in China, I never remember my mother, went out shopping and brought back dog meat. So that's not. So no. So dog meat is not part of China's mainstream food culture.
Okay.
So when I say mainstream food culture, mainstream food refers to those that people eat on a regular basis, and food that you don't need the businesses to promote it.
Right.
Now, if you go to China, you open the refrigerators of 100 households.
Yeah.
You are unlikely to find the frozen dog meat in it. Right? You can see pork, beef, mutton, fish, egg, and everything else, but there is no dog meat. That's for sure.
Okay.
So in other words, that's not part of the Chinese mainstream food culture.
Okay.
Now, regarding the dog meat festival, I started to notice it, of course, in 2009, 2010.
Okay.
And I started to follow it very closely. 2011, 2012, and I was in a city very close to Yulin in 2013 in China. I was in Hong Kong for a meeting, in Guangzhou for a conference, and then I just didn't go over to the province, but I was watching the event. But I did go to Yulin in 2014, 2015, 2016, and 2018. So I've been there altogether about 8 times. Wow. So I went there sometimes twice a year. Now, the dog meat festival, as you mentioned, was created by the dog meat traders and officially launched in 2010. Right? They started to prepare for it in 2008, 2009, right, and officially launched in 2010. I went to Yulin. When I was in Yulin, I did go to the city and go to the countryside to interview people, to ask about the festival. One of the questions I asked was, when I talked to a 50-year-old man, I asked him, did you have a dog meat festival when you were 20 years old? And I saw an 80-year-old man, several 80-year-old men. I asked them, did you have a dog meat festival when you were 30 years old, or when you were 10 years old? That's way back in history, yes, right? And none of them say that they had, dog meat festival. Right. But they did say, we did eat the dog meat once in a while, not on a regular basis, not in a restaurant, but somebody killed a dog or right, bought a piece of pork, and we ate it, right? But they also tell me we never eat our own dogs. Oh. So that's in Yulin. So wow, in other words, you just don't kill your own dogs, right? Right. So the dog meat festival, the entire thing about dog meat festival was a creation by the businesses to promote the sales, mm-hmm, and then promote it as part of the culture, part of the right, tradition, so that make it more attractive, right? Yes. And in that way, they could get the support from the local government, because the local government in Yulin and in Guangxi really want something, a special local cuisine to attract tourism. Okay. Right? And
they were not. Okay, they were not on board with the dog meat festival.
But earlier they were kind of suspicious. But then when the traders said, "Well, if we do this, if you guys support us, then we can help bring business into right, the city." Now, let me tell you this. China is a huge country, right? Smaller than Canada, of course, but it's also a continental-sized country.
Yes.
If you look at China, right, China's development has been uneven. So if you go to coastal areas like China, like Shanghai, Beijing, this area, it's very developed. But you go into, inland areas, it's less developed. Now, Guangxi, the province, is at the lower part of the economic development compared with other provinces. So the local leaders were under tremendous pressure to catch up. Because if your province is not doing good economically, provincial officials are less likely to be promoted to the national government. So there is a motivation there.
Absolutely, there is. Yeah. It's always about power and money, right?
And personal advancement, right? Then how can they get advancement? How can they get a promotion if their province under their leadership, right, develops as fast as the coastal areas? Then they would be promoted. Yeah.
And so they cooperated with obviously the dog meat traders and said, okay, so the festival basically is about drinking lychee wine and having food and gathering friends and family. But also the consumption of dogs, which has attracted tourists. Sad to say, but a lot of people go there because they want to try something they could not try in their home country, right? Dog meat is not something that's served on many tables in most of the world. So so they succeeded at that, and I guess that was one of my questions.
In a way, they succeeded in a way,
Yes.
But not dramatic. I can tell you this, though, especially since the international community reacted very strongly to the festival, condemn it. The festival started to attract these kind of people who were nationalistic. Right?
Yes.
Who were thinking, who are you, Westerns, trying to teach us, right, what to eat, what not to eat? And I want to do this just to show how angry we are. So this kind of people attracted to, to Yulin's dog meat in the last few years. Yeah.
And so at this point, you feel the government, with all the protests and all the international outrage, has there been any progress in trying to put a ban on this festival or to abolish it altogether? I know some NGOs have approached the Yulin government and asked them, can we put an end to this festival at least, because I guess the term festival is really it's really outrageous for us because it should not be celebrated, right?
No.
So do you feel there's any progress being made with the government and Yulin at this point to ban the festival because of all this global protests? Or?
I would say there has been some progress. Now, why I say so? In the past, government publicly announced that they supported the festival. Now, since 2014, the Yulin local authorities have tried to distance themselves from the businesses, and they also have tried to do certain things that they think they have to do it. For example, they order the businesses to put on the sign, the word dog.
Right, to not show it.
Right. Not to show it, right? Even though that's kind of a, more like a gesture, but like a symbolic,
it's
right?
It's like a makeup job.
But that shows that the government started to feel to be ashamed of it, right? Now, another thing is the government, started to warn the businesses, days before the festival, try to tell them, can you guys, tone down, right? Can you guys don't do, or don't sell, right? So they try to do it, or be low profile, right? Don't do it, right? Or don't put so much, right? So this also shows if something is so good, so cultural, so traditional, then you should stand up. Like this is something to defend, right? That means you are not, the government is already started to suspect that it has any merit, right, of doing it. But we did see also internal document circulated by the Yulin authorities ordering government employees not to, eat not to eat at the restaurant, not to attend, and even the families not to do it. Now, if anything is you're so proud of, right, so traditional, you would not have done things like that, right? So all this has been the result of international, protests and domestic Chinese condemnation. Yes, so I would say yes. They are trying to scale down. Yeah.
Right. And like many people that have been on the podcast have said, the idea is to ban dog and cat meat altogether, because then the festival will obviously die, right?
Absolutely. That would be the goal, right? And as a matter of fact, we have been telling the union authorities through, Chinese partner groups that the dog meat industry is a violation of all kinds of Chinese own laws. Right, it's against Chinese criminal law, right? Because the dogs are stolen, that's a criminal offense, right? And when you ship dogs, over greater distances from other provinces to Yulin, right?
Yes.
And you are violating the national government's regulation regarding live transport.
Yes.
Right? And the second, Yulin and Guangxi, the entire province, is one of the provinces with the biggest number of human rabies infections.
Yes.
So,
it brings about health concerns. Yes.
Yes. Live dog trade, right? Causes, make it, risky for the workers who slaughter dogs at a great number. Right. And also, when you slaughter dogs in public, a lot of those restaurants slaughter dogs in front of the restaurants or in rural markets where young children can see.
Yes.
So you are violating China's law for the protection of the minor. You create psychological trauma to these young people. Right. It's a child abuse. So we are trying to say this industry has been violating a lot of Chinese laws. So the Chinese government must ban it. But of course, we understand, it takes,
time.
Takes the national government, legislative action to do it.
Right. Well, that's very good, because you brought upon a point that, first of all, you said that it's not as rampant all over the country as some would think. So would you say it's more concentrated in the south or certain more remote areas of China? And Beijing, for example, is there dog meat being served in restaurants over there? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question. In China, there are three major regions of dog meat market.
Okay.
So one region, the biggest one, is South China, and this is composed of Guangdong, Guangxi, where Yulin is, and parts of Sichuan, parts of Hunan, Yunnan, and Guizhou, these provinces. Okay. So this is, but in this is the biggest market, but it has been going down, right, considerably, compared with 10 years ago. I can give you one example. We did a search on dog meat restaurants in Guangzhou, a mega city of 13 million people.
Wow.
It used to have thousands of restaurants and food stores selling dog meat. But last year we did a search on a gourmet website in China. We only found 36 restaurants selling dog meat.
Oh, so wow.
That's a drastic, drop.
Drastic drop, yes.
Yeah. So that's, South China is the biggest dog meat market in China. Now, the second biggest market is Northeast China, where, centers around Jilin province and Liaoning province and Heilongjiang province. They're mostly in Jilin province, which it borders with North Korea.
Okay.
So that's the country, the second, largest dog meat market, and still stays strong.
Okay.
Why dog meat consumption is strong? Of course, promoted by the dog meat traders. Not that people want to eat it, but the businesses, target, office workers, different group of people. So in Changchun, the provincial capital of Jilin province, Changchun city alone. Now we did the same, gourmet website, restaurant search using the keywords of dog meat and dog meat restaurant. We were able to pull up about 800 restaurants, right, serving dog meat, right. So that's second, market of the dog meat meat. Now the third market, centers around northern Jiangsu, western Shandong province, and eastern Henan province, which is about 400 kilometers south of Beijing.
Oh, okay.
Right? So it's not in Beijing. Now, so these are the three major dog meat market. But I have to say this, dog meat is consumed in many other places, not just these three areas.
Right.
But these three areas have the biggest, amount of sales.
Right. Okay, so that's very good to know. So the percentage of the population, after speaking about these markets, what would you say? The percentage of the population of all of China that consumes dog meat, it's, I guess, older generation, would you say? Like the younger generation, I don't think it's as big of a trend for them to eat dog meat?
Yeah, there is a generational difference with regard to dog meat consumption. Generally speaking, older people, like older males, are the main, eaters of dog meat. But still, national, we did a survey in China in 2016, a nationwide dog meat consumption survey.
Right.
Those people in China, those people who have ever eaten dog meat, including just once in their life,
Right.
or twice in their life, no more than 30%.
Oh, at 30?
So 30.
30%. And that
Only,
means once in their life they might have eaten dog meat. So it's not
Yes.
something they consume regularly.
No. So of the 30% of people who have eaten dog meat, they may have just eaten once. They may have just eaten, twice or three times in their lifetime.
Right.
Or they may have eaten meat more regularly. So we did have, I don't have the statistics on hand with me, but those people who eat on a regular basis, like once a week, is very tiny. No more than 1% of those 30%. So majority of the 30% people who have eaten just once or twice, and these people didn't eat dog meat by themselves. They run into a catering event or dinner party.
An event of some kind.
And somebody ordered it, and they ate it by accident. Now, since you ate it by accident, when we ask you, have you ever eaten it, you have to be truthful. You have to say, oh, yes, what a pity, right? So, and also, in Northeast China, we did another study of a city with a concentration of ethnic Koreans, because people believe Koreans eat a lot of dog meat, right? And there are about 2 million Koreans in China.
Okay.
In that particular city, there is a huge, Korean, population. Now, our study also, confirmed that minority of the ethnic Koreans eat dog meat. Majority do not eat dog meat.
And speaking of South Korea, because we can't really speak about the North, although I'm sure it's something that happens over there too. South Korea, it is a big industry over there. I mean, they have unions to represent dog meat traders and farmers. It's a different market because, they farm dogs. They literally breed dogs into existence to slaughter them. Is there a relationship between China's history and South Korea? Like, did South Korea have this own practice, of their own doing? Or a lot of people said during the war, Chinese military would bring about the practice to Korea of eating dog meat, and they would claim that it had medicinal benefits, especially for men, increasing men's virility and etc. It was like a tonic for health,
Well, that may not be the truth.
Okay.
Koreans and Chinese, for thousands of years, they basically share the same, culture, very much so. So Korea used to be a tributary, state to China. So it's a part of China's empire. So very much influenced by China. Yes, in South Korea, dogs are farmed, and I went to one of the farms, and we closed that farm and rescued all the dogs to the United States.
Wonderful. When you say we, you're speaking of the HSI?
Humane Society.
Okay,
Humane
okay.
Society, yeah, we closed many farms, and I participated in closing one of the farms in a number of years ago. So their dogs are farmed, yes. But I have to say this, even in Korea, when dogs are farmed for the market, the industry, even though they have a union, the industry, the revenue from that industry compared with Korea's enormous, economic size,
Right.
it was a fraction, very tiny,
Yes.
negligible. The same thing in China, even though we say China has the world's biggest dog meat consumption and dog meat market, 10 million dogs, roughly 10 million dogs
Right.
are slaughtered for food in China. But the total tonnage of dog meat consumed in China, according to a study, was about 97,000 tons of meat. So 97,000 tons of dog meat.
Okay.
That was extremely small. You know how much China produces, pork, beef, and mutton. It was
It's-
84 million tons.
Oh my God!
So you
it's
have
nothing.
84 million tons. So compared with China's livestock industry,
It's
the
much
dog
greater.
meat, just a
fraction.
piece, a drop in the bucket. But of course, China is a huge country, right? 10 million dogs. We say one dog is one dog, right?
Yes.
Let alone 10 million dogs, right?
Right.
So that's and another thing about Chinese dog meat trade is most of the dogs come from suspicious sources, not from farms.
Yeah, that's right. That's the difference between, and that's why a lot of people have developed the term poaching, because actually the dogs belong to often a family. They're pets,
Yes.
stolen
Yes.
pets. And
Yes.
the other part is obviously made up of strays. I imagine that, they're snatched off the street.
Yeah.
And especially, I think they get like money. So if you see your neighbor has a dog and you can get $50 for it, well, in that part of the world that's very poor, obviously you're gonna trade that dog and get your money. Whereas it's more, I guess, regulated in South Korea because it's actually farms and it's not people taking pets from families, right? So there's a difference there. So let's speak a little bit about the history of dog eating and China. We'll concentrate on China because that's your expertise. So we talked a little bit about it because you said your mother never ate dogs, but you grew up in China and it was not like something you were exposed to. But in your opinion, where does it date back? Because I've read an article that was published by World Dog Alliance. And it was called China, How It Was Political Perversion, Not Culture, that led to the dog meat trade as we know it today. And apparently, according to this article, the practice dates back to 1912 when the Qing dynasty, who revered and loved dogs, were overthrown by the Kuomintang Nationalist Party. And as a symbol of their hatred towards the Manchu, because the Manchus took to power, I think, in 1644. As a symbol of their hatred for them, they would boil dogs alive just to spite them. And so when the communists subsequently took to power decades later, Chairman Mao ordered mass execution of dogs, declaring them filthy and unclean. So I don't know if there's any accuracy in that historical recount, but I will let you speak about that.
I have to disagree with that account, especially about people eating dog out of revenge for the Manchu dynasty. That could be misinformed and exaggerated.
Okay.
We always have, evil people in any society. They do all kinds of evil things, right? And they wouldn't, I don't rule out some individual persons in the 1910s or 1920s, out of the personal anger against the Manchu dynasty, they want to do something to frustrate them, that's likely. But as an entire, Han people, entire people, to do things like that, that's inconceivable. I have not read anything like that. Now, let me say in this way. China, the time when dog meat consumption was popular was more than 2,000 years ago, around 3,000 years ago. That was the time when dog meat consumption was considered acceptable. That's the ancient China, right? However, this practice started to decline in Han Dynasty. Right? So Han Dynasty about 2,000 years ago. Right? So since 2,000 years ago to today, Chinese society has a new a different attitude towards dogs. Now, around 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, dogs are sacrificed, when somebody's dead, all right, and then they are slaughtered as a food. Even until Han Dynasty, but after Han Dynasty, those kind of practices were no longer there. Now, in Tang Dynasty, which is about 900 to 1,000 years ago, Tang Dynasty, a lot of families started to have dogs as pets, right? As household guard, guard dogs as hunting buddies. So the society started to change the attitude towards it, and also dogs were no longer considered decent food in ancient time. So since Han Dynasty,
it's declined.
Declining, and since Han Dynasty, especially in Tang Dynasty, dog meat was considered dirty meat.
Right.
Why it was dirty? Dirty not because dogs, eat anything, but because a lot of those dog meat were result of theft. You steal other people's dog and you kill it. So the meat is not considered legally clean or morally clean. So it's dirty meat.
Yeah.
So in China today, we have a saying, still we say that, it's a proverb, which goes like this. The dog meat cannot be on the dinner table of noble people. That's not the meat you're supposed to eat. Now, twice in China's history, two emperors tried to outlaw dog meat consumption, even though it didn't succeed. So largely, the society, the mainstream society said no to dog meat consumption. But of course, you always have people who kill other people's dog, right? And eat it. So those are not considered a decent act. So traditionally, right, dogs, right, were not a source of food. Right? Now, of course, the Mongol dynasty, which is the Yuan dynasty, the Ming dynasty, and the Qing dynasty, which is the Manchu dynasty.
Right.
Those are the nomadic people, right? So they need dogs to help hunting. That's why they developed a special liking for dogs. Right. Now, dogs' situation become worse in China after Mao Zedong Communist Party, took power in China.
Right.
They started a nationwide government action against the dog ownership. Why is that?
Yes.
Because why is that? They don't allow people. As I told you, we live in an urban area, and I was little. I want to have a dog, but my mother said no. Also, government, discourage people from having dog. This is because the communist government, after taking power in China, they considered dog owning as a lifestyle or a habit of the rich people.
So yes, it makes perfect sense.
Because they considered the dog owning and wearing makeups for women, wearing, fashion.
Right.
Not a good political, lifestyle.
Right.
You pay too much attention to on yourself, on luxury. So that's why they don't allow people to have. But there is also an economic aspect to that, prohibition. Because during Mao Zedong's time, China's economy was very poor. So the government could barely feed the people.
Right.
So if you allow people to have a pets, right, then it would put more pressure on the government to provide the materials, right, or food to the society. So there was an economic aspect to it.
Okay.
But also there is a public health, aspect as well. So the government during Mao Zedong's time would launch almost annually a so-called mass dog cow campaign or mass dog kill campaign.
Okay.
So particularly slaughtering dogs in urban areas, right? So the dogs, for today's, dog meat industry are largely from the rural areas when people allow the dogs to roam outside the house.
Right.
But I would just want to emphasize this. Even during Mao Zedong's time, there was no, dog meat trade, no dog meat restaurant, because, the economy was poor, right? People were poor.
Yes.
The individuals were not allowed to open your restaurants. But today, right, since 1980, China has been economically very active, and
It's
a lot of
booming.
booming,
Yes.
and a lot of private restaurants, and people were encouraged to do anything as long as they can make money. So there are some people in rural areas started to ship dogs from southern provinces to mostly at that time to Guangzhou, right? And then the dog meat trade started to develop, started to go up. So it's a new thing. Now let me just say this: in ancient China, there was no dog meat trade, right? In Mao Zedong's China, in Mao's China, there was no dog meat trade. When I was little, we never saw dog meat, restaurant, right? Now, dog meat restaurant, dog meat trade, both have been new things in the last 30 years or 40 years.
I see. Because it's a way for people to be economically independent, to have a restaurant, to
make money.
Yeah, make money.
To make money.
And I guess when you think about it, there are a lot of strays, and without proper, spay and neuter clinics and all that stuff, obviously strays repopulate very quickly, and it makes for an easy food source, I suppose. And I mean, there's that aspect as well. And like you said, since the Chinese economy has been very much in development for the last 30 years, like you said, there's been a lot more consumption of meat as well, like pork. And it's a symbol of affluence, right? So when somebody can afford meat, it's like seen as, oh, you're doing well in life. It's a sign that you're of prosperity. Yeah. So it's not just dog meat. It's the meat consumption has risen quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So that brings me to one of the questions I want to ask you, because since we're here and there's been a lot of a huge animal welfare trend developing all over the world, with vegans wanting the world to pay attention and to realize the environmental impact of meat consumption, and obviously the ethics. A lot of them has said, you've kind of answered that, because they said, Chinese eating dogs is the same thing as us eating cows and pigs over here. But my response to that has always been, well, China also eats cows, pigs, and chickens, so let's not pretend. That's where we're even. We're doing the same thing. And would you say that the cows, chickens, and pigs are pretty much slaughtered in the same way that we do in the West? In China, there's no difference. And it's not like they have special torture techniques for the cows as they do for the dogs. And I mean, how is it different, I guess?
Okay. Yeah, I think you asked a very good question. There is a misperception that dogs are tortured when they are killed for food. There was a saying that dogs, when they are tortured, then the meat tasted better.
Yes.
That was a false.
That is not true.
No, not true. I have to tell you this. The dog meat trade is brutal. It's already very brutal. We have to understand that one. Right? The dog meat traders, the slaughterhouse workers, did not really need to torture the dogs to make them even more ugly. They're already very ugly. The trade itself is very very ugly. So we don't need to make them look more ugly by saying that they are torture dogs. Why I say this? Because if we want to fight dog meat trade, right, we have to use accurate information.
Exactly.
If we, make up information to make them look very bad,
right.
even though they're already bad, they don't need us to make them bad.
Right.
They're already very bad, all right? So if we exaggerate things to put things that they didn't do on them, we are not in a moral position
right.
to challenge them. So I want to make that very clear. Another thing, why I say this, because I sat down with slaughterhouse workers. I have photos, I have videos. When I went into Yulin slaughterhouse, I talked to the owner, I talked to the slaughterhouse worker. I said, did you guys torture each one of the individual dogs that when you kill them so that make the meat taste better? This is what they tell me. We have to slaughter up to 50 dogs, only 3 hours. We only have 5 people here. 3 hours we have to slaughter 50 dogs, and we have to clean them, disembowel them, dehay them, right? Get them ready for the rush. We don't have the time, right? And then they also say, we are not monsters. They don't look like monsters, of course. They say, we are in the business to make money.
That's right.
We are not here to torture them for fun. Okay, and then they say, if I don't do this, I may be doing something else. I may slaughter pigs. I may slaughter chicken.
Right? I may slaughter something because that's all that they know.
Yeah, but one thing is for sure, these people are more desensitized. I would not say they were more evil, right? They were more desensitized because these people are mostly grew up in rural area of China. Yes. Now, if you live in rural area, you grew up in rural area, you are more desensitized. Why? Because you witness, pig slaughter
from the get-go,
or cow slaughter, right, all the time, right? So that's why. So pig slaughter, cow slaughter. Even though China has built centralized slaughter facilities, kind of similar to what we are doing in the West, there are still individuals slaughter the pigs, slaughter cows. If they would apply any torturing technique, I don't think so. Why? Because the purpose is not to having fun. The purpose is to do it quickly.
Yes.
Right. So I would reject that claim that the Chinese are so. Yeah, that's not. What is the cruel? What is the brutal? Right? Is the industry. The industry is brutal by nature.
Yes. Right? That's very good that she clarified that.
Yeah.
However, I guess for us, the reason why we associate torture is that a lot of images are seen where the dog, his snout is completely sewn in or has wired shut. Blow torches are used while the dog's alive. They've put dogs in vats of boiling water alive. You hear the dog scream. These videos, I'm assuming they're not all doctored. Some of them might be.
Let me tell you this. Now, these videos, I agree, may not be doctored, but these videos may be done by individual people who wants to anger people, but they are not. Okay. But they are not. They may not be the part of the that's not the industry standard, the industry practice.
Okay.
So you would always have evil people. You would always have evil people want to do this, and they say, "We do this. Do you have any problem?" Right? So all those videos you talk about.
Yes.
Blowtorch. They only blowtorch dog after dogs are killed, disemboweled, the insides out. Why they blowtorch dog? Because they want to make the body shiny. Shiny. So that they can sell better price. It's not that, if you blowtorch a live dog, the dog is going to fight. You're not going to get the job done, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit harder.
Except you want to create the effect that they are being tortured alive, right? Wow. So that's why I say we have to distinguish why the standard industry behavior, and the other is the behavior of some brutal people, right? So that's different.
So it's more isolated cases. It's not like a practice that's done. It's not a
by
standard.
The industry.
It's not a standard.
No.
Okay.
It's not a standard.
That's a bit of a relief for me. That's for sure. But like you said, it's whether it's cows or pigs or chickens or dogs, any kind of animal industry, like when you're exploiting animals and commodifying that animal, it's always going to be laced with a lot of suffering, a lot of
Yes.
pain, and that
Totally.
that is
Yeah.
and unanimous. It's
Yes.
brutal. And
I totally agree. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So we agree on that. And you did touch upon the dog calls. So that dates back to when you said that the communist regime took power and they wanted to prevent people from having dogs as pets.
Yeah.
So is that when the practice began of like doing regional
Every year.
calls
Every year, yes.
and it still happens today? Even though
Today, not so often. That was one every year. Of course, they don't want people to have, pet dogs, but also they say it's for rabies control, for disease control purpose. That's almost every year, every urban community, they do that during March time. But today, because people have pets, right, they cannot do that anymore unless some individual, cases happen where rabies were, reported.
Okay.
Then the local authorities, out of a panic would do something, unscientific and irrational. But we have not heard about that in the last few years, because every time you found to a massive dog call because of one single case of rabies and you kill so many dogs, people are going to react very strongly. Yeah, so not since. Yeah.
Okay, well that's good to know. But I guess some of my previous guests on the show, they said that there's certain dog breeds that are not allowed, like larger
Yes.
dog breeds.
That's I can tell you that in Beijing, in many cities, they don't allow dogs, higher than 35 centimeters.
Okay, and why is
so-
that?
Because there is a misperception among the Chinese officials and some Chinese lawmakers or rule makers. They believe that the size of the dog is the dog's temperament or the dog's aggressiveness is proportional to the size of the dogs. So that's a false connection. We have been trying to tell Chinese officials that's not the case, right? Chihuahua can be very aggressive.
Yeah,
right?
and a golden
But
retriever is so docile.
sweetest dog,
the
right?
sweetest dog, yeah.
Yes.
So it's a matter of, I guess, slowly educating them. But I mean, you would think they would know at this point.
Well, we have to say this. China allows companion animals or dogs in urban area only in the last 20 years, right? So they moved from banning dogs to allowing dogs.
It's
right?
already a
Now,
great progress,
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So we had to give them, time, even though we cannot stop, spreading the information that your view of the dogs is wrong, right?
Yes.
And also I have to say, we have to be optimistic, with the younger generation, becoming, occupying leadership positions.
Yes.
Then a lot of those changes will take place, I'm sure.
So you remain very hopeful.
I'm hopeful, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes.
have you been in discussions with government officials yourself on representing HSI or your own research projects for the university you work with?
Yeah, mostly I talk to, I would say, for my research,
Yes.
not necessarily represent HSI, because I go to China several times a year.
Yes.
And I've been to many farms, livestock farms, wildlife farms,
Right.
and many different facilities. And I talk to local officials and national government officials on different animal-related issues. Yes. Yeah.
And are they open to hearing what you have to say? You feel like their mentalities are ripe for change? I mean, are they? I guess what I'm asking is, near term, is there any kind of resolution that we can expect from those governments in terms of legislation, animal protection laws? Because China has no animal protection laws. So on that front, just animal protection laws, where are we at? Do you think there's going to be anything instilled anytime soon?
Yeah, a lot of younger officials are very much, open to, our views on animal protection.
Right.
Older generation of officials are more skeptical, more conservative, more resistant. I even talked to an official from Yulin government, and I can see that he was not completely resistant to my position. So that means they have been influenced by a lot of the protests and so on and so forth. Now China is one of the top industrialized countries, the only top industrialized country that does not have animal protection law. If we use the British Martin's Act of 1822 as a standard, China has been behind for 198 years behind.
Yes.
So a lot of countries have animal protection law, anti-cruelty law, animal welfare legislation. China has only one law in the name of protecting animal, that is wildlife protection law.
Okay.
Even though we say that's really not a law for protecting wildlife, but protecting wildlife business interests, but that's the only one they have. So in terms of animal welfare protection law, I'm not too optimistic for in the shorter term.
Okay.
But eventually, I'm sure that law will be made in the future.
Because the younger generation will take the lead and probably make big progress. What about the coronavirus? Since we're speaking today, we're February 7th. And that outbreak, it's causing a lot of stir, big chaos. I mean, is that going to help maybe waking them on the fact that these wet markets that probably were the originator of that virus? Do you think, they put a temporary ban on wildlife, but is there any hope that this will become a permanent ban because of this virus that took its toll and has caused many deaths?
That has been the wish of all of us, that this temporary ban will become a lasting ban, a permanent ban, right? Because China's wildlife business has hijacked the country's wildlife policy. So in the last 30 years or so, public discourse regarding wildlife protection has been controlled by the wildlife business industry, right? So, and of course we know that the coronavirus in Wuhan was traced to wildlife or species sold for food on the market, very much similar to SARS, right? Yes. Which was also traced to wildlife sold for food.
Yes.
So we just hope that this would be another wake-up call, which the government will take it more seriously, right? Unlike in the past, right? They just ignored, and the wildlife trade continued, the wildlife eating continued.
Right.
China has come to a crossroads to make a final decision, because there are two interests for the government to choose.
Yes.
There is a national interest of public health.
Yes.
Okay, of the 1.4 billion people, that's the national interest, and there is a parochial interest of the wildlife business or wildlife farmers, right? So which one is?
They're a bit of at odds, right?
Which one? The country's national interest cannot be allowed to be hijacked by the minority's interest of the business commercial interest, right? So how many people killed? Right, more than 600 people killed as of today, right? And more than 40,000 people infected.
Right.
And China's economy is going to be, adversely impacted greatly this year. Right.
So it's a great opportunity for us to make that point and to put some pressure on them to pass such a law. And is there anything that, I've seen some campaign letters going around to government officials. Do you think that is a good strategy to pursue? I mean, I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes from foreigners, but I'm assuming there's something being done within the borders of China Many animal welfare groups are probably
Yeah.
taking advantage of the opportunity
Yeah.
to engage them.
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah.
aware of anything concrete?
Yeah, there are a lot of Chinese experts, legal professionals, and even members of the Congress are preparing petitions, letters, and
Right.
proposals to the national government to outlaw the wildlife trade
Yes.
and wildlife wet market. Now, as to appeals and petitions from outside China, people like us, can we do it? Yes. Why we can do it? But of course, we have to do it in a way to be respectful,
Yes.
right? We just need to make the message, cross, right? We don't have to, use, inflammatory,
Yes,
those kind of words, right? But we just need to send a message why we have why we can do it, because this disease of mass destruction does not recognize national borders.
Yes,
right?
that's right.
It goes across the country.
It's
Now we appeal to China not out of our safety issue, but also out of the public health of the entire world, right? Including the Chinese people. So there is no reason for us not to appeal to the Chinese authorities.
And so I'm imagining the World Health Organization must be on doing something towards that. It's like you said, it's a worldwide issue. Like, it's affecting all of us, right? So if this virus propagates and crosses the borders, well, then it's everyone's concern at that point.
Yes, yes. So the international community should help, alert the Chinese government that you really has to stand on the side of the 1.4 billion people. In other words, you have to stand on the side of the national interest
instead of the minority,
and not the interest of the
Yes.
Wildlife business interest. That's a minority interest.
Let's hope we make some headway on that front.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I know we are getting close to having to wrap things up. I mean, you've been so generous. I don't want to overextend your generosity. But there are a few points I want to touch upon. And one of them, since we're talking about laws and the legal aspect, I wanted to have your opinion, because in 2018, the animal hoping legislation was founded to create and sponsor laws to protect these animals from being exploited, abused, and neglected. The greatest victory of which was achieved that same year with the enactment of H.R. 6720, which is the Dog and Cat Meat Trade Prohibition Act that was passed into law in December of 2018. What is your opinion on this law, and do you think it will have any of the intended impact on countries like China? I guess the law, basically it's now made illegal to eat dogs and cats in the United States of America, which is the biggest economy in the world. So you would think I would encourage all other countries to adopt such laws. I know to date there are only a few countries where it's outlawed, and that means it's the U.S., Germany, Austria, Taiwan, South Australia, and I don't know if I'm missing any, but it's only a few countries that have adopted such a law. So do you believe the Chinese government will have any impact on them? Like, to have countries like this adopt such laws and say, we believe dog and cat meats should not be food and it should be prohibited to slaughter them for food?
Yes, United States legislation, basically closed the loophole, which could, be utilized for, illegal, for dog meat consumption, even though, Americans don't eat the dogs, right? Yes, any progressive, steps,
It's
in other countries can have a positive, impact on China. Right? But I cannot say whether the impact is going to be enormous or immediate. I cannot be sure of that one. But at least it shows, China that there are certain things that the international community strongly disapprove. Right? So dog meat consumption is one. Right? In China, we say that mainland China, still dog meat consumption is still legal, right? Or I can say in this way, it's not illegal. That probably would be more accurate. But in Hong Kong and in Taiwan, right?
Hong Kong is the other one.
Yes, yes. Hong Kong is another one. But because Hong Kong is a part of China, right? So we believe that Hong Kong's practices and Taiwan's practices were most, relevant to the mainland Chinese.
Right.
But of course, United States, legislation will have impact. Now, why I say Hong Kong and Taiwan's experience would be most relevant to mainland China, because those are two Chinese communities, right? So that's why the saying that, we Chinese eat dog's meat, well,
apparently not.
Apparently not. Right? You have some Chinese in Taiwan, Chinese in Taiwan, Hong Kong. They don't eat it. So the argument, especially the argument that ultra nationalistic mainland Chinese does not hold water.
That's great. Yeah. And when was it outlawed in Hong Kong?
Dog and cat meat consumption was outlawed actually in the 1950s, long time ago.
Okay.
Largely influenced by the British laws, British practices, because at that time Hong Kong was under British rule. Right? Taiwan's was more recent, since 1998, I believe, and most recently is 2018, 2017.
2017, that's right.
2017, around that time, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So in essence, I guess you're saying it's not a bad thing, and the HR 6720 is certainly good, but the fact that Taiwan and Hong Kong have banned it has a lot more weight towards China.
Exactly. More relevant.
It's more relevant, exactly.
Yes.
And so I also want to ask you, because I've had at this point about 13 guests on my podcast. I've not published 13, I've only published 5. But I've been learning a lot, and most of my guests say, obviously, education is key. But what they're trying to do, like the nonprofits that have set up shop, if you will, in China, they're trying to educate, especially the young, on how dogs can be fantastic animals. I mean, they use them in therapy clinics to show the population that dogs can be great additions, like to your lives. They can enhance our lives. Are you aware of any big programs that are geared towards educating the youth? For example, I'm talking about people bringing dogs into schools for children to interact with and to show them how great companions they can be. Are you aware of any kind of programs like that?
Yes. We have noticed a lot of such programs conducted by the local Chinese animal protection organizations.
Right.
And the Humane Society International has been working in China in the last 12 years directly, largely working with companion animal organizations, Chinese organizations on companion animal issues.
Right.
So we sponsored conferences in China, and we sponsor the outreach programs to schools, to communities.
Okay.
And we also participate in dog rescue and emergency responses to situations like in Wuhan, households evacuated, but the dogs and the cats were left behind. So we mobilized our partner groups in China to try to help those people who need somebody to go back to feed the dogs, to feed the cats, so until they can come back. And also our partner groups in other cities, because evacuation not just happening in Wuhan, but also in other cities.
Yes.
So go to the households to feed the dogs until the owners come back.
Oh.
But also we did a large number of social media posts, rejecting rumors that the coronavirus was caused by dogs and cats.
Oh.
So we did a lot of these things, and also we helped drafting, letters for the purpose of educating the public about the many benefits of companion animals.
Okay. And you said you mentioned conferences and school programs. Was this done in particular years, or is it ongoing, or is it?
It's ongoing. We have Humane Society International had supported two major conferences between 2006 and 2016. One is called China Companion Animal Symposium, and another one is called the China Dog Ownership Management Symposium. And then since last year, we started to host a new flagship conference in China called China Animal Law Forum. Animal Law Forum, to encourage Chinese legal professionals, prosecutors, to go after animal abusers using any other laws, because China does not have anti-cruelty legislation, right? Then people say, then we are trying to send the message, you don't have to wait for anti-cruelty legislation in China. You can use all other laws.
The existing laws.
Existing laws go after animal abuse. For example, if you buy eggs claimed to be made from to be produced by free-ranging farms, but you found out those eggs are actually laid by battery caged eggs, then you can sue for fraudulent advertisement. Is that right? So we are encouraging lawyers, prosecutors to go after dog meat traders, especially if they slaughter dogs in public. There is no other law, but we can use the law for the protection of minors against that behavior, right?
Because it causes them trauma, right?
That's a child abuse, right? So that's why you lawyers, legal profession, and Chinese law enforcement departments have to be creative in using existing laws.
That's fantastic. And when is this symposium? Did it already happen?
We held the first one last July. And we will have a second one. And lawyers from the United States, law school, professors from like Lewis Clark School of Law, and Harvard Law School, professors, Hong Kong University law faculty professors, and also of course I was there, last year. So we'll continue to have another one, second Animal Law Forum, China Animal Law Forum in China after the epidemic is over. So we have to make sure that's gone.
Today, right?
Not now.
Well, that's fantastic. So that's very that's definitely progress. And I guess one of my questions I always ask guests is, as concerned animal lovers and regular everyday people like me, what actions can we take that have the greatest impact in helping the cause? Because a lot of us are ending up signing petitions. And one of the reasons why I started the podcast is that I felt, what does it do? Like these petitions, I mean, I heard that the government of, I don't know if it was the Yulin government, but there was a petition that had over 11 million signatures. I mean, that's a lot. And the government didn't even want to look at it. So I was like, clearly that's not the way to go. I mean, that's not the best that we can do. And so, of course, there are ways that we can help. We can donate to the right nonprofits that do legitimate work. But it's always hard to know which ones are legitimate and which ones are not. I mean, that's another ball game. But also we can volunteer our time. I mean, that's a great way to measure our impact. And by the way, I volunteer with HSI. Because I live in Montreal, Canada, and it happens to be that HSI Canada has their offices in Montreal. And I support them and their work, and they've brought back dogs from South Korea, and I've worked with those dogs. So it's a fantastic experience because you get to really see the change, the transformation in the dog, and it makes you feel very good. And obviously you can adopt. So what would you say are things that we can do as foreigners, like me living in Canada, you in the U.S., what can we do to really help the cause? And that's not going to set us back because, we don't want to antagonize China, and I don't think that's going to be the right attitude. What would you say?
Yeah, I think you have covered most of the things that I would say you could do. And say you are in Canada and supporting Humane Society International Canada, which I visited.
Oh, yes.
Last year. Yeah, I'm very familiar with folks. And also we sent 110 dogs from China to Canada through HSI Canada and got adopted into Canadian families.
Wow.
And I want to thank all these compassionate Canadians for embracing those traumatized dogs. For things you can do, for example, what you are doing now, spreading information about the situation, but has to be accurate information.
Exactly.
It's very important. We have to tackle the industry, right? The industry is the enemy of, animal people around the world, because the entire industry is against humanity, against the dogs. So spreading correct information is very, very important. But I would also encourage you to continue to sign petition, right? Even though they say, this is 11 million people sign and they don't look at it. Well, when you send those petitions in, the Chinese authorities realize this is a voice from outside the world. But as you said, we have to be, sending the message, right? But we also have to be polite and in friendly tones, right? That's the way you get your message across, right? Otherwise, the stonewall you, then you don't get the message across, right? Yeah.
I agree, because I am vegan, and there's a group called Anonymous for the Voiceless. I've been to some other events, and basically the idea is to really have a dialogue with people, and that's the only way you're going to get through, because if you shame people, their defenses go up, and there's no communication at that point. So that's great.
That's exactly the case. Now, as to helping Chinese shelter manage shelters or organizations, there are many people standing at the forefront against the cruelty in China.
Right.
For example, some of the facilities took in hundreds of dogs and operating in great difficulty. But if we can help them, and of course, if you want to find out which one is legitimate, which one is not legitimate, we have a list. We can give you the information. So just in case people in Canada wants to help animal people in China, definitely you can share my information. I can point them to the right legitimate.
Is this list
groups.
Available on HSI website, or is it more a list that you would have?
For now I have it.
Okay.
But we believe that we should really have it, on the website of HSI.
Yes.
So, but we should work on that one. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I will ask you after the podcast to send me that list, so we can actually share it, because that's great.
Yes.
And lastly, I guess I wanted to ask you. You've said yourself that you've visited slaughterhouses in China, and you clearly are very sensitive to animals and their cause and their plight.
Yes.
How does this affect you, like psychologically? I mean, is there a lasting impact on you from seeing such traumatic cruelty in front of your own eyes? I'm traumatized from seeing it on a computer screen. So, how have you dealt with that over the years?
Yes, I have. I went into slaughterhouses. I tried to avoid eye contact with the dogs. Because I couldn't take all of them out. Right? But once by accident I have eye contact with one individual dog and one individual cat, I have to take them out. Otherwise, I would be tortured, inside. So over the years, I took out several dogs. And I have one in my house, a dog from Yulin. And I took out the cats from Yulin and are living a wonderful life in England. So later you want the pictures, I can send you pictures. And when I went back to China last October for a conference, and I did a side field trip to a dog meat store. And outside the store, I saw Samoyed,
Oh yeah,
totally
they're beautiful.
totally sad Samoyed sitting outside, and I couldn't I couldn't leave without take her out.
Wow.
So we took her out, right? And after about 1 month, we flew her to the United States and adopted into the homes of Harvard University Law School's parents.
Oh,
And
wow.
her first day in New York, and then the first day in the United States, she already attended Harvard University. She was in Harvard.
She's a Harvard graduate.
A graduate, right? The first day she was at
Oh,
Harvard
my
Law
God.
School, right?
That's
And now she's the happiest dog. If you go to my Facebook, you can see the post. It's a stunning picture. She's such a beauty. But she was totally, completely conquered outside the dog meat, store, looking
wow.
sad, right?
And how do you go about when you say you take them out? Like, do you negotiate with the?
Of course,
Yeah.
I had in that specific case.
Yeah.
There is no way I can get her out. I took her, then I would be prosecuted, right?
Right,
So I
right.
had to talk to the owner. I'm going to get that dog out of the misery, out of the slaughter. I can pay you the money. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. I had to do that. Yes.
Okay, well, I totally understand, because once you lock
Yeah.
eyes with an animal like that
Yeah.
in distress,
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
it's gonna
Yeah.
haunt you.
Yeah. Because I don't have the luxury of time to report to the police that this dog might be stolen,
Stolen.
right?
That's-
That would take for like weeks and months, and I was in China
And you
just
could
for a few
not,
days.
yeah.
I said, don't do that, okay? So that's how things go. Yes.
And when
But
you
of course, individually, I would definitely not go into a slaughterhouse with 1,000 dogs and pay the money to buy
No.
all the 1,000 dogs. That's not the way to do it.
Absolutely, and I
Yeah.
guess that's been corroborated by many guests, because it fuels the
Yeah.
industry. I mean, you're giving them
Yes.
money for what they're
Yes.
selling, so
Yes. Yes.
you're encouraging them.
Yes, exactly.
But I think that's a beautiful story, and we'll definitely want those pictures, because we'll post them in the podcast.
Okay.
So I guess my final question for you would be, well, you've already had established a very good rapport with animals. So I guess your years of research and work in animal rights, it hasn't really changed your relationship to animals. You always had a very positive one, right? So
Yes.
So that
Yes.
continues on. And
Yes.
lastly, are you are we ever going to see the end of this dog cat meat trade in Asia? And if
Yes.
so, how long do you think it'll take?
I think yes. The answer is yes. I hope it comes,
Sooner.
it realizes sooner than later.
Yes.
With the rise of young people, if you go to China, go to urban China,
Yes.
young people are very much like Americans.
Yes,
Right?
they're very
They are-
influenced, right?
They're very into, and a lot of families have pets. And also, one more important thing, China today is much wealthier than China when I grew up. A lot of people
Yes.
could not even feed themselves.
Exactly.
Right? So these young people, they have no money fears, right? They spend the money, on whatever they want to do, including pet keeping. So I'm confident, because China today is in a civil war. What does that mean? China is in a civil war between animal lovers
Yes.
and those small number of people who wants to eat the dog, who wants to
Right.
kill dog for food. They're fighting. Right?
Yes.
So eventually, and this group is growing. This group is shrinking. So eventually, yes, I'm
It's
optimistic.
inevitable. I think with
Yes.
time. I spoke to
Yes.
someone in South Korea, Nami Kim, who founded
Yes.
Save Korean Dogs, and she
Yes.
said 20 years is about what
Yeah.
it's going to take, because it's
Yes.
very much the domain of the older generation that are stuck on
Yes.
the tradition of eating dog meat, and they do believe it gives them
Yeah.
health,
Yeah, yeah.
So cross our fingers that it will be. We'll all see the end of it. Maybe not in my lifetime. I'm a bit older, but certainly the next generation will probably see the end of it. So
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing.
yes,
We fight for dogs. That does not mean that pigs and horses and chicken and cow are not important.
That's
Morally, morally, they are all equally important.
Exactly.
Right? But why we are fighting for dogs most of the time? Because we share the roof with the dogs,
Yes.
right? And that's also the start point of all animal, protection movements across the world. You're starting with the dogs and cats, and then you move to other, animals, right? So step by step, right? So it's not that we are not caring. Yes.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, because that's been my point all along. I'm in a group of there's a strong vegan community in Montreal.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were not wanting to embark on that cause because they were like, it's the same thing. We're hurting cows. What about the cow? But I was like, what is the easiest category of animals for us to remove from slaughter? Like, it would be dogs and cats. That's the most important thing, because dogs and cats in most of the world are not food. And so it's the first step. And if we asked my government to go vegan overnight, that's not going to work. I can ask my government to ban dog and cat meat. That is plausible. That is something we can do today. So thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, you're very welcome.
I appreciate so much your time. You've been so generous, and you've shared with us so much a wealth of expertise. Hopefully, maybe we can have you on the podcast again, and we could have a conversation that would last hours and hours. But I thank you for your time. And we'll post the links to, obviously, your webpage. You've written so many articles on animal welfare, so we'll make sure that that's available in the description below the video. So thank you, Dr. Lee, and we wish you well, and we'll be in touch.
Yes, have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay.